Imagine a machine that weighs 200,000 pounds. It is constructed from massive sheets of highly reflective aluminum, packed to the brim with combustible aviation fuel, and equipped with a digital transponder designed to continuously broadcast its exact coordinates, altitude, and speed to every radar station on the grid. It is a Boeing 727, one of the most recognizable and widely tracked commercial airliners ever built by the United States. In the modern era, hiding a machine of this sheer magnitude is a logistical and physical impossibility. Every single flight path across the globe is strictly logged. Every takeoff is authorized. Every movement is watched from above by a deeply interconnected network of military satellites and air traffic controllers. Yet, on the late afternoon of May 25, 2003, at an airport on the humid, sun-baked coast of Africa, a massive American-owned Boeing 727 defied the fundamental laws of modern surveillance. The aircraft, bearing the registration N844AA, slowly began to taxi down the cracked concrete runway. It had not been cleared for takeoff. Its transponder, the electronic heartbeat that allows the grid to monitor its existence, was suddenly and deliberately switched off from the inside. No communication was established with the control tower. The radio channel remained completely, terrifyingly dead. As the sun began to set over the Atlantic Ocean, casting long, distorted shadows across the tarmac, the massive jet accelerated, lifted its heavy nose into the evening sky, and banked sharply to the southwest. Within minutes, it vanished entirely into the darkening clouds. No distress signal was ever broadcast. No wreckage was ever found floating in the ocean. And the American flight engineer seen boarding the aircraft just before it moved was never heard from again. In the paranoid, hyper-vigilant years following 2001, a missing commercial airliner of this size was not just a bizarre mystery, it was a Tier 1 global security nightmare. It was the ultimate asset for a structural disruption event. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Central Intelligence Agency, and a sprawling network of international intelligence agencies launched one of the most frantic and extensive manhunts in human history. They scoured high-resolution satellite imagery. They interrogated undisclosed informants across multiple continents, but the aircraft had simply evaporated. How does a 200-ton American airliner simply cease to exist on the grid? Welcome to Holl World USA. We are the investigative division dedicated to tearing away the thick, redacted ink from the world's most dangerous and tightly guarded secrets. We specialize in deep archival research, exposing the undisclosed files, historical anomalies, and institutional cover-ups that have been deliberately erased from public memory. If you are fascinated by the dark, untold chapters of human history, you are in the right place. To understand how a Boeing 727 can simply cease to exist on the grid, we must first look at the massive financial quicksand that pulled the aircraft to the very edge of the world. The aircraft in question had seen better days. By the early 2000s, older, less fuel-efficient planes were being retired, stripped down, and repurposed for heavier, dirtier work. N844AA was purchased by an aerospace company based in Miami, Florida. Their ambitious plan was to convert the aging passenger jet into a massive flying fuel tanker. The company secured a contract to lease the newly converted silver tanker to a diamond mining operation in Angola, a country slowly recovering from decades of brutal conflict. The heavy aircraft arrived in the Angolan capital of Luanda in early 2002. Almost immediately, the entire operation began to hemorrhage money. Steep landing fees went entirely unpaid. Bureaucratic red tape stalled the lucrative fuel delivery contracts. The Angolan aviation authorities officially grounded the aircraft. N844AA was heavily chained to the tarmac, baking endlessly under the relentless, unforgiving African sun. For over a year, the massive jet sat completely idle, gathering thick layers of red dust and accumulating a staggering mountain of debt. Airport fees alone piled up to over $4 million. The Miami-based owners were growing increasingly desperate. They needed their massive aircraft back in the United States before the local authorities seized it permanently.
Padilla spent grueling weeks working in the suffocating heat of the Luanda airport, repairing the neglected engines and slowly breathing life back into the massive jet. It was exhausting, bone-crushing work. Padilla was under immense, crushing pressure from the corporate owners in Miami. Despite the mounting psychological challenges, by late May 2003, the complex mechanical repairs were largely complete. The 3 massive engines had been successfully tested. All that remained was securing the necessary diplomatic paperwork to depart. But on the late afternoon of May 25, the standard operating procedures of international aviation were violently abandoned. The late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the cracked concrete. Padilla and his hired assistant were seen boarding the massive Boeing 727. At approximately 5 in the evening, the 3 massive engines roared to life with a deafening metallic scream. The massive aircraft began to move, but it was not moving toward a designated maintenance bay. It was taxiing directly, purposefully toward the active runway. Inside the glass-walled control tower, the air traffic controllers stood up from their desks, watching in absolute bewilderment. No flight plan had been filed, no permission to taxi had been granted. The radio channel remained dead, filled only with the faint, hollow hiss of static. The massive silver jet continued its relentless, heavy roll. It moved erratically, swerving slightly side to side, as if the person at the controls was physically struggling with the sluggish weight of the machine. The controllers watched in horror as the 727 deliberately bypassed the holding point and entered the active runway. As the aircraft lined up for an unauthorized takeoff, the bright red exterior anti-collision beacons and the glowing wingtip navigation lights were abruptly extinguished. The aircraft plunged itself into total darkness. At the exact same moment, the plane's transponder was manually deactivated from inside the pitch-black cockpit. N844AA was now flying completely blind. It accelerated down the runway with terrifying speed, lifting heavily into the fading twilight and banking out over the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. The immediate aftermath was a toxic cocktail of sheer disbelief and mounting international panic. The primary radar coverage over the African coastline was notoriously weak. Within a few short miles, the signal degraded into nothing. The news triggered an unprecedented shockwave through the highest levels of the American intelligence apparatus. A 200-ton American-owned jet had just been hijacked by unknown actors. Satellites operated by the National Reconnaissance Office were immediately retasked, their powerful lenses sweeping across the African continent. American diplomats pressured local governments to scour their remote dirt airstrips. The entire global intelligence community was hunting for a single airplane and finding absolutely nothing.
Intelligence analysts developed chilling theories. The first theory pointed toward a highly organized sector of the global underworld. Africa was a hub for shadow operatives moving weapons across porous borders. A modified Boeing 727 was the ultimate prize for a smuggling syndicate. Did professional rogue pilots board the aircraft in secret before the takeoff? The second and most heavily redacted theory suggests an information containment strategy. when a massive, unidentified aircraft suddenly accelerated down a primary runway with no lights and a dead transponder, local military protocols would have been instantly triggered. Did the local Air Force scramble fighter jets to intercept the rogue Boeing 727? If the aircraft was shot down over the deep waters of the Atlantic Ocean, a massive cover-up would have been immediately deployed. Admitting to the destruction of an American-owned commercial airliner would have ignited a devastating diplomatic crisis. Yet, despite extensive oceanic searches, not a single piece of floating debris was ever found. The final and most haunting possibility revolves entirely around the crumbling psychological state of Ben Charles Padilla. The pressure he was under was immense. What if there were no mercenaries? What if the crushing isolation drove him toward a sudden departure? Is it possible that Padilla managed to wrestle the massive aircraft into the sky entirely by himself? If he was alone, flying blindly into the night over the vast ocean, his fuel would eventually run out. He could have guided the massive machine far beyond the reach of coastal radar, letting the engines die in the terrifying silence of the deep Atlantic, plunging the aircraft into the abyssal trench where it would never be recovered. The ultimate unsolved case, buried forever beneath 3 miles of crushing black water. In the years that followed, the official leads simply dried up. In 2005, the FBI officially announced they had found no evidence that the aircraft had been used in any major incidents. But the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. To this day, the disappearance of the Luanda 727 remains one of the most glaring blind spots in the history of modern global surveillance. The Phantom Flight of 2003 is a chilling reminder that no matter how tightly we believe we control our world, there are still shadows deep enough to hide a Leviathan. If this deep dive into the declassified shadows sent a chill down your spine, you belong right here with us in the archive. We are uncovering the files that institutions want permanently erased. Hit that like button right now to feed the algorithm and help us expose the truth to the rest of the world. Subscribe to Holl World USA and ring that notification bell so you never miss a briefing. Share this video with anyone who thinks they know the whole truth about our modern world. The archive is open, the redactions are fading, and we are just getting started. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and we will see you in the next investigation.